always believed that just as you can learn something from everybody, you're capable of greatness. We all have this greatness within us. So much of us feel fear or anxiety or just lack of confidence in letting that come from them. And like we said in the very beginning, like we're all born with this innate savagery inside of us. You just have to harness that and then run with it. And I feel like if you're stuck in a job that you have zero fulfillment in, if you're in a life path that you don't find excitement in, then something's wrong. Like my favorite day of the week is Monday because I get to start the week off strong doing what I love doing. So you owe it to yourself to figure out what that is and then double down on it because you will die. Like life is finite. It's short. It's going to be up before you know it. So spending every waking moment of your life doing something that you feel is passionate, that you're adding value to the world with, I mean, that's what you should be doing.
What is going on, everybody? Guys, welcome back to another amazing, very, 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 very exciting episode of the Superhuman Life. As always, guys, I am your host, Frank Rich. And before we jump into today's guest and today's conversation, I just want to remind you guys and let you know how incredibly grateful we are to have you here with us. Guys, here we are. It's the end of January 2022. And this is the time where people start to fall off. People start to fall off on their goals. People start to fall off on their resolutions. If you're still holding strong, if you're still pursuing making 2022 the best year ever, I want to let you know that you're about to enter the separation season. You're about to enter the time where most people give up on what they want to accomplish. So whatever it is you're going through right now, whatever it is that you're struggling with, endure it, trust the process that if you continue to show up on a daily basis, change will take place. Transformation will begin to show up in your life, and everything you could potentially dream of is just on the other side of you constantly taking action every single day, guys. So I just want to encourage you. And if you haven't done so yet, make sure to go back and listen to our first episode of 2022, the 5 life hacks to make this year the best year ever. Want to make sure you guys are taking action on those tips every single day. It's transformed what we're doing here. It's transformed my life. And we're really excited about some of the things that we have in the works and just where the show is going. So just want to continue to thank everybody out there. If you guys are supporting this show, I know there's a lot of people that have been sending me messages, how they're sharing this with their men's groups. They're sharing this with their friends, with their coworkers, with their colleagues. Without you guys, none of this would be possible. You know, we've seen some record growth over the past few weeks and months. I just want to let you know that means the world to me. So if you guys want to continue to support us, you want to continue to get this in front of more people, you can do us. And you can do that in one of two ways. First off, continue to share this. If there's people in your life that need to hear these conversations, continue to do them a blessing, continue to do us a favor by sharing it with them. But more importantly, wherever you guys are listening, if you're listening on Apple, if you're listening on Spotify, if you're listening on whatever platform out there, do us a favor and let those services know that this podcast is valuable. And you can do that by leaving a 5-star rating and written review. But guys, what an incredible conversation that we have here today. I have on the show with me none other than Robert Keto Savage Sikes. Robert is the brainchild and he's the founder of Keto Brick, which is transforming the health bar space. It's transforming the industry. And we get into what is a Keto Brick, the origin story behind it, how him and his wife were able to start this company out of their kitchen, and they've now grown into multiple offices, multiple warehouses, and just landed a warehouse that was 3 times bigger than what they were operating from the beginning. He's also the founder of the Live Savage and Keto Savage brands. So we get into the story behind that because when you hear Robert speak, he's got this Southern gentleman tone to him, like very soft-spoken, very educated, with a little hick twang to him. But then you see his brand and it's Savage oriented. So was curious from the beginning, like where did Savage come into play? So we talked about Robert's upbringing a little bit, kind of his introduction into bodybuilding, how he messed around and played with, the bro science dieting approach, which obviously I've shared kind of my story with bodybuilding. And then that transition into ketogenic bodybuilding. So something that when he got into it, not a lot of people were really promoting and really talking about. And it's something that is not fully understood by a lot of people. Can you lose weight? Can you build muscle without carbohydrates? How does that work? Don't you need them? Aren't they burn fat? This and that. So we debunk all of that. He shares with you his 2-meal approach to dieting and getting in contest shape. We talk about his training. We talk about some upcoming things that Robert's working on. So if you're interested in ketogenic bodybuilding, if you're interested in physique optimization, if you're interested in building muscle and losing weight, if you're interested in business, if you're interested in entrepreneurship and finding a passion, all of that is jam-packed into today's conversation, guys. So it's a whirlwind. There's a lot. Robert is a wealth of knowledge, a wealth of information. So I'm just incredibly grateful and blessed to share him with you today, guys. So without further ado, let's get into today's conversation: a ketogenic approach to living a savage lifestyle with none other than Robert Sikes. Hope you guys enjoy. Robert, my brother, welcome to the Superhuman Life.
Hey man, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, brother, I'm really looking forward. There's just so many things I think I want to get into here today with you. I mean, we're obviously going to get into the ketogenic stuff, the Keto Brick, kind of the origin story behind that. I think obviously your transition from bro science bodybuilder into the ketogenic bodybuilding space that you're doing now, and yeah, hopefully just kind of provide a lot of value and insight to the audience here. But I think the great place to start, man, for me, just something that's kind of intrigued me as I've been prepping for this interview here today. Savage. What's the genesis of Savage? Because when you think Savage, I don't know if it's the way that you are in the gym, but when I hear you speak, man, like don't take this wrong way. You got this kind of Southern kind of gentleman kind of twang to you a little bit. So I'm just curious, like where did the Savage come into the story?
Yeah, it's funny, man. Before keto, before bodybuilding, before any of that stuff, my like passion in life was all about Native American history. Like I read everything I could get my hands on about Native Americans. Like I'd go out and I'd like try and emulate stuff. I'd tan my own hides, make my own bows, all this stuff. They just fascinated me. So they're kind of like known as savage. It's kind of like a bad rap on what they are. But the concept of savagery just stuck with me because it's like, look, it's primitive, it's primal, it's innate, it's pure. It's just savage. And the ketogenic diet and bodybuilding both encompass that quite a bit as well, in my opinion. So, kind of bringing all my passions together and creating this pure, primitive, primal, just essence that exudes out of you. Because I feel like everybody has it within them, whether or not they tap into it or not is up to them. But just kind of making that the embodiment of the brand seem like a natural fit.
Yeah, no, I love that. I love that so much, man. And I think obviously where I was going. I mean, when a lot of people think of Savage, like they think of Liver King. They think of this guy living out in the woods, eating raw meat, just kind of like grizzly bear kind of look. And I know you probably got that savage kind of inside of you, but soft spoken, very articulate, super well educated. Like it just didn't connect with me right out of the beginning. But that's amazing, man. When did bodybuilding kind of come into the picture for you?
I started training as a junior in high school. I was super small, man. I was like 115 pounds, had zero self confidence in how I looked and felt. And my uncle was the only athlete in the family, and he was bigger, stronger, and I just kind of wanted to emulate that. So he took me under his wing, showed me how to do a couple bicep curls and lat pull downs, and I just got addicted. And then from there, I just took it and ran with it, man. Like I never really had a coach, but I'd watch YouTube videos of all the pro bodybuilders. I'd try and emulate what they were doing in the gym. I built my own little gym. The first year of working out was with my at my shop, in my dad's shop with like pieces of steel that he had laying around for welding, just like totally primitive, workouts. But it worked. And then I was able to just kind of go from there and keep building upon it. And now I mean, it's pretty much my life.
Were you an athlete growing up? Like, I mean, were you active in sports? Like, was the crossover pretty smooth transitioning? Like, did you have that kind of physical body awareness when you first got started?
Yeah. So I'd played like basketball, baseball. I played a little bit of football, but I didn't really ever do too good in football. But for me, I liked sports, but I didn't really like the team sport aspect of it because with bodybuilding, it's all on you. Like you're the reason for your successes or failures. Like there's no one else to point the finger at. And I liked that aspect of bodybuilding. So once I started doing that, that took all my efforts. Like I didn't really do any more team sports after that.
Guy, and you've remained a natural athlete. I know you've earned your pro card in a natural division. Was that something that was super important to you at the beginning, like maintaining that natural status?
I didn't really even know that there was a non-natural side when I began. I mean, I kind of like you'd see all the magazines, you see all the people on YouTube, and they're obviously not. Like if they're on Olympia stage battling out for the Mr. O title, they're not natural. And I guess I knew that, but I never really thought of it in the context of what I was doing. For me, I was just always seeing success without any performance enhancing drugs, and I never really felt the need to deviate from that while I still was seeing success. And at the end of the day, I got into bodybuilding to be healthier, to live a higher quality life, and I saw so many people in my gym just locally that weren't even competing at a high level. They'd go through all the roller coaster emotional dips and swings that come from being on a phase, being off of a cycle. I didn't want to have to deal with that. I just wanted to kind of keep things very holistic, very healthy. and it seemed like going the natural route was the best way to do so.
Now, when you say you got into bodybuilding to be healthy, are you talking about the competitive side of the sport, or more train? Like, are you just talking about train, like the aspect of training and utilizing the gym and your nutrition to alter your physique? Are you actually talking about I got into competitive bodybuilding to be healthy? Because I don't think I've ever heard. I
No, I
don't think I've
definitely
ever
did
heard
not
that.
get into
Yeah.
competitive bodybuilding to be healthy. Yeah, I mean, competitive bodybuilding, like stepping on stage, is oftentimes not healthy at all. So I feel like the ketogenic approach to bodybuilding is healthier than the alternative, but just simply living an active lifestyle, resistance training, eating, be on top of what I was eating, like that all was with the intention of being healthy, having more quality years in my life. But the aspect of actually stepping on stage and competing was not, driven from a desire to be as healthy as possible. That was kind of driven from a desire to just take it to that nth degree and see what I was capable of mentally and physically.
Yeah. Now you competed for a while, for a couple years, correct? Before switching to keto. So yeah, maybe kind of walk us through, kind of those first couple years, what prep looked like, what training was like, your off season, on season kind of cycles, and then when did the keto bodybuilding come into the picture?
Yeah, so like I said, I was 115 when I 115 pounds when I started, and at the time there was no keto. I didn't know what that was, but I was like reading all these magazines, and everybody was, you got to eat big to get big. So I was eating a lot of food, man. I was putting down like 7,000 calories a day, and I bulked up to 230 pounds, and I'm only 5'7", so I was a freaking, round bowling ball. I was strong. I had like shape to me, so but I wasn't healthy by any means. But I bulked up to 230 pounds. Competed in my first show as a sophomore in college, and following the advice of these magazines, I gave myself 12 weeks to diet down, um, thinking that I would step on stage at 200 pounds, just shredded. And lo and behold, I lost 80 pounds, stepped on stage at 150, and was shredded. But I did so, like losing 80 pounds in 12 weeks is not healthy or sustainable. I lost a bunch of muscle in the process. I was just super depleted, man. Like I was eating sub 1,000 calories at points. I was just killing myself on the cardio, and I won the show, but then afterwards, I had no guidance as to like how to properly reverse diet. So I bulked up, or I put on like 20 pounds literally overnight. Like I was just super sick, had a really bad rebound effect, and that really screwed with my head. That's kind of what led to a bunch of disordered eating tendencies that plagued me for 2 or 3, 4 years post that show. And I had competed in that time. That was my first show. I competed, I think, 2 or 3 other times after that, all while using carbohydrates, kind of the bro diet split, the if it fits your macros protocol. And then after that, I just realized that there's got to be a better way, because my relationship with food was just in the tank, man. So I kind of dabbled with keto. Didn't know what it was at the time, but it was as I dove deeper into it, learned what I was doing, and just felt so much better. I was able to improve my relationship with food. And then after doing that for a few years, I decided to step on stage again with the ketogenic approach, and that's when I earned my pro card.
Got it. Yeah. Let's speak to more of that relationship with food thing, because obviously we talked a little bit about before hitting record, kind of the work that I do, the coaching, to helping guys freedom from porn, and there's a major component of we utilize a keto carnivore keto-ish diet in our recovery, because I feel that many times guys that are struggling with kind of compulsive or addictive behaviors in one area of life, like that is going to be a trend in other areas of life. So instead of attacking the big elephant in the room with pornography, let's learn a little bit of discipline. Let's work on some of our other relationships with some of our other compulsive habits first, and then that's going to have a carryover effect. So if you can maybe talk more to kind of like what happened with your relationship with food, and what was that process like?
Yeah, so I don't really know, I couldn't put my finger on what the actual mechanistic property as to why I went through all the eating disorders to begin with. I'm assuming it had something to do with like the psychology of seeing so much weight gain, being so restricted for so long, and then letting, the tidal waves come down, so to speak, and just eating everything in sight. That screw with my hormones, I'm sure. That screw with my chemical balances in my brain, I'm sure. But then I think from a psychological aspect, just simply not feeling like I was disciplined enough to moderate that really screw with my head. But when I started doing a ketogenic approach, I didn't feel guilty about any of the food I was eating because it was all quality food. This was long before there was a bunch of keto crap options out there. So everything that I was eating was good quality foods. And since I was eating, good quality proteins and fats and vegetables, I feel like that helped regulate my hormones, my hunger hormones, leptin, ghrelin levels kind of started to stabilize. My relationship with food improved. And I didn't feel guilty about anything I was eating. Even if I overconsumed foods, as long as they were coming from good quality sources, I didn't have near the negative psychological implications that came from it because I didn't feel as guilty about eating a bunch of hard-boiled eggs as opposed to a bunch of brownies. So that really helped bridge that gap and made it more sustainable for me. And then it just started spilling over into other areas of my life as well. Because when you're addicted to anything, whether it be food or porn or drugs or alcohol, like it's amazing how debilitating it is towards every aspect of your life. Like it consumes you to the point where your level of productivity is hindered significantly. Like your relationships suffer, everything suffers. So once I was able to break free from that and just started seeing so much success flourish in all the other aspects of my life, I mean, I was super passionate about it. I was addicted to the high that I got from how much better I felt, and then I started pouring myself into it.
What's the time frame? What's the year of this? Just
I think this would have been around 2015, roughly. I think I did 2 competitions in 2000. My first show was in 2012. I did 2 more in, I think, 2014, 15, somewhere in there, and I started doing the ketogenic diets in 2015, if memory serves me, and I've been keto ever since then.
yeah, there was really nobody. I think Palumbo, from the highest level coaching perspective, I think he used a keto-ish, but it was very, very restrictive. And then he was an advocate of these super big refeeds once a week. I can't think of like anybody back then that was really advocating for keto, and it's still a very small, circle within the bodybuilding space. Obviously, keto has become it's become a massive thing from a health perspective. Let's define it. When we're talking about, obviously everybody has heard the term keto before. They've heard ketogenic, but in your eyes, in your lens, how you see it, what do you mean when you say the ketogenic diet?
Yeah, it's funny, man, because like you saying, there's so many different definitions for keto now. It's like to the point where it's kind of bastardized what keto is. Like there's all these versions of keto. And for me, my version of keto has been pretty much the same from the very beginning. It's basically just changing your body's fuel supply from carbohydrates and glucose to fat and ketones, leveraging a higher fat approach with optimal protein intake and very minimal dietary carbohydrate. And that's pretty much what it's been for me since day one, and that's what it will continue to be.
Now, one of the things I remember, I've been in the fitness space for a long time. I mean, working in gyms in the early 2000s, getting NASM certification was the first one that I picked up. We were taught in the book, this is early 2000s, like fat burns in a carbohydrate flame, and I think that is where the 6 small square meals, like you need to keep eating small amounts of carbohydrates every few hours to kind of keep your metabolism spinning. Like, why is that not accurate? And how can we lose weight? How can we lose fat consuming a lot of fat?
Yeah, it's funny, man. It's weird how all these, especially within the bodybuilding subculture, there's so much dogmatic thinking in that space. And some of it probably stems from some glimmer of truth, but like you don't need 6 meals a day, 7 meals a day to keep your metabolism revved up and burning hot. Like there's so many things that I believed and that kind of distracted from the quality of my life. I mean, I typically eat 1 or 2 meals a day now, depending on what my caloric intake is. My metabolism's fine, my hormones are fine, everything's fine. And it's liberating because rather than being a slave to the clock and having to eat every 2 or 3 hours and feeling like all my gains are for naught if I don't get my protein shake within 20 minutes of my anabolic window post training, like a lot of it's just nonsense. So you can just eat quality foods, make sure you're getting optimal amounts of those quality foods, and then just simply start living your life.
Yeah, man, I can't tell you the amount of breakdowns that I probably had, or I know I had them. Like I would have alarm clocks like at work, like every 3 hours it would go off. I was working in a kind of in a call center, like a lot of outbound kind of sales. I literally would hang up with people, like almost pretend like the phone like got disconnected because I had like literally for an entire 16-week prep, I kept a log. I ate at 7 a.m., 10 a.m., 1 p.m., 4 p.m., 7 p.m., and 10 p.m. Like on the within the minute, like for an entire 16 weeks. Like and I was a slave. Like I was a slave to my cooler. Like I couldn't go anywhere without having 3 Tupperwares with me. You show up to a family event, you got Tupperware. You go to an amusement park, you got Tupperware with you. You drop food on the floor. It's the only last meal that you got. You're literally like are in tears. So I love hearing that
It's
that
speaking the same language, man. Like I used to, like when I was doing this, my first show was in college at the time, and I would literally
Mhm.
walk out of a final exam. If that final exam landed on a time that I was supposed to be eating, I would walk out and leave and eat and then come back, even if it meant that I wouldn't finish the test. Like I put that meal timing as a higher priority than passing the class half the time. And it's just like so destructive. I mean, you become super, I mean, you become addicted to eating by the clock, and just like we're talking about other things with regard to addictive substances, like you put it on such a high pedestal that every other area of your life can't. I mean, it's forced to suffer, and now I don't have to really fool with any of that. So it's liberating for sure.
now with the muscle building though, like have you I know you said you've been keto seven years now. Like, is that even in the off season? Do you utilize carbs in a strategic fashion from a muscle building perspective, or have you noticed gains protein and fat, no carbs, no
Yeah,
carbs?
yeah. I mean, like I stay keto, strict keto, so I haven't deviated. I haven't had a carbohydrate based meal in 7 years, full stop. Like no, not even once.
100%, like not even one, like not even
100%,
one.
not even once. 100%. And for me, it's just super sustainable. It's healthy. All of my lifts have gone up. My strength's gone up. I look at pictures every time I do a cut, and even in the off season, I can see improvements in my physique year after year after year. As long as I'm eating at enough calories in the building phase, and I'm implementing progressive overload in my training, training heavier, training harder, improving the intensity, my body adapts. It grows. So I'm not really. I haven't noticed any adverse effects in the complete absence of carbohydrates.
I'm assuming at this point, probably cravings are gone. Like, I mean, I can imagine you could probably walk into a fresh hot bakery and not even like the whiff would pull you to it. But in those first, 3 6 months, or maybe even the first year, were you having to rely on a lot of discipline or willpower, or was it just like once you kind of made the choice and decision that this is the route I'm going? Like, how were you able to stay the course and not even deviate once in 7 years? Like, I'm really fascinated by that. By
Yeah,
that.
I think if I never had like an eating disorder, it probably would have been easier to deviate. But once I like had seen and witnessed how much I was struggling from that and was able to totally course correct via the ketogenic diet, how much better I felt with keto was a greater reward system for me psychologically than it would have been to temporarily have that high from a pastry or something like that. So for me, it was easy to say, okay, this is who I am. This is my identity now. I don't need this stuff anymore in my life. So in that sense, it was a pretty easy transition. And now that I've been doing it for 7 years, like it's like there's no food out there that calls me, in the dead of night and just tries to get me to deviate. Like there's nothing that's out there that's worth it to me in that regard.
And do you think like carbs are the enemy? Like, do you feel that there's no place in anybody's diet or anybody's lifestyle for carbs, or is this a conscious choice that you've made in your life? You kind of said that this now your identity. Like, are you a I don't want to say like are carbs the enemy or carbs the devil, but I think you know what I'm saying. Like, can some people thrive on them from a healthy perspective, or do you feel it's best for everybody to make the choice and just live a ketogenic lifestyle?
No, that's a good question, man. So I don't ever want to come across as being dogmatic about it at all. I mean, there's absolutely people that have done incredible things with a carbohydrate based diet, and it's working, very well for them. So I say more power to them. Keep doing what you're doing. For me, I've noticed far more benefit in removing the carbohydrates, and I feel like a lot of people, uh, even if they don't have disordered eating tendencies, they don't really earn their carbohydrates. That most people aren't physically active to the point where they would need the carbohydrates. So the general population probably would benefit from a lower carbohydrate approach, but I certainly don't want to villainize carbohydrates by any means. I mean, it's simply a food group. Like it's not like it's a evil thing. I don't want to give carbs that power over me by saying it's good or bad. I just haven't
Yeah.
noticed any benefit from incorporating them, and I noticed a lot of benefit from removing them. So I'm highly advocated, to not include them in my life personally.
Expand on what you meant there with the earning of the carbs, if you can.
Yeah, so most people, I mean, if you're an extreme elite level athlete and you're burning through your stored glycogen very rapidly, you're putting out a lot of that, energy expenditure throughout the day, then you could use those carbs and put them to good use. But the people that are, watching Netflix for 3 hours every single day, working an 8-hour job with their feet propped up on a desk, like they're not really going to have the expenditure that would necessitate, require them to have the carbs and make use of it. So they'd probably benefit in the removal of that to keep blood sugar levels, insulin more or less even keel. Now, again, the people that's like the elite level athletes that are putting forth that activity, they could incorporate those carbohydrates without any really adverse effects. But at the same time, I don't really feel like they're required by any means. I mean, there's been a bunch of high level elite athletes coming out of the woodwork that are totally removed carbohydrates and they're still functioning at a higher rate. So I wouldn't say that carbs are necessary to perform at a high level.
So what does training look like for Robert, both off season and on? Knowing that you can't really tap into these glycolytic states. Like, is it single sets, heavy compounds, longer rest periods? Are you working in some other kind of hit variable training?
Yeah, so once you really become deeply adapted, that's going to be a little bit different for every individual. But you use less muscle glycogen when you're in a ketogenic state, and then you're able to replenish muscle glycogen pretty efficiently, even in the complete absence of carbohydrates through gluconeogenesis, et cetera, et cetera. So you don't really have to have like I don't feel like I'm not having stored muscle glycogen. I feel like I'm able to do those glycolytically demanding activities without any problem. My training like I like to operate in that rep range that most people say requires a lot of stored muscle glycogen. So I'll typically train between 8 and 15, sometimes 20 reps on a lot of my sets. And I'll do heavy days, I'll do hypertrophy focused days with more blood flow. But I'm doing all these glycolytically demanding activities and doing so at a pretty high rate.
Drop sets, giant sets, like incorporating multiple exercises into
Yeah, I
superset.
superset
Do you
everything.
really? Wow. Okay. It's fascinating. Um, let's get like tactical if we can. So if somebody's out there, hearing this and maybe they subscribe to bro diets, maybe they've been 4 or 5 small meals every single day, and some of these things are kind of starting to click. Like, how does somebody transition from not a full standard American diet like eating junk food, but a guy's kind of like dialed in with his nutrition. He's already training 3, 4, maybe 5 days a week, and he's paying attention, but he's maybe following more of a if it fits your macro, more of a kind of 40 30 30 split. How can somebody go from that's already kind of dialed in there? What will the transition look like into getting into a ketogenic state? Do they just make a choice one day, they start eating 2 meals, and it's a smooth ride, or is there kind of a ramp up period that you need to go through?
Yeah, so I mean, being keto adapted for 6 months is going to be different than being keto adapted for 6 days. Your body's going to start producing ketone bodies in the absence of carbohydrates and glucose. So you might register, 0.5 or greater on a ketone monitor within 24 to 48 hours, but that doesn't really necessarily mean you're keto adapted and your body's got the machinery built in place to make the best use of those ketones that are in circulation. So I always encourage people to have like this long game approach to it. Expect a little bit of a decline in performance for the first few weeks, maybe in the first few months. But then once your body does acclimate, you should see that performance come right back to normal, if not exceed normal. But the one thing that I see a lot of people make a mistake of is they, especially if they're already kind of doing healthy habits, training, monitoring their food intake, they'll oftentimes, kind of stay in this bro dieting philosophy of putting protein on the pedestal so much so to the point that they keep protein incredibly high and then they just simply remove carbs, but then they don't add any additional fats in. So if you remove carbohydrates as your fuel source, you're trying to become ketogenic, but you don't add in dietary fat, and you keep dietary fat relatively low, you basically just totally destroyed your substrates for energy because protein is not a great substrate for energy. It's great for building, it's great for recovery, but it's not a great fuel supply. You either get that from your carbohydrates or your fat. So if you're going to remove the carbohydrates, it stands to reason that you need to increase your dietary fat from a fuel standpoint. And then once you do that, your body it's not going to have near the dip in energy that it would otherwise, which makes the transition much more smooth. And then as you become more deeply fat adapted, your body's going to become much more efficient at tapping into its stored fat reserve for fuel as well. But that's a good way to kind of bridge the gap, so to speak. So you're not just totally removing your energy entirely, and then likely going to cause you to deviate and derail because you don't feel very good.
Yeah, so if somebody's got 2,500 baseline calories, that's kind of their target, and they're hitting that, like we said, kind of a 40 30 30 split, kind of balance, whether called bro or whatever. So they're at that 2,500. What you're saying is most people they take that they once they decide to make keto or they try to remove carbs, they there's this dip in their calories because they remove the carbs, but then they don't fluctuate the other variables. So how should that look like if we remove our carbohydrates out of it, but we want to maintain a 2,500 baseline calorie? What should be the percentages from a fat perspective and in a healthy protein?
Yeah, so a good, rule of thumb is gonna be a little bit different for every individual. But if they basically just have their protein grams to equate to their pounds in lean mass, and their carbs are gonna be very low. I mean, trace carbs are gonna add up. You may have between 15, 20 grams of total carbs coming from various vegetables, eggs, heavy cream, stuff like that. And then basically make up the balance of those calories coming from good quality dietary fat sources. That would kind of keep your calories equated for. And it's gonna give you a fuel supply in the form of dietary fat that you're not gonna be able to obviously you're not gonna get it from carbs anymore. So kind of if some people are doing like incredibly high protein, like some people in the bro dieting space are taking in 300 grams of protein a day at a body weight of 120 pounds. It's not really going to be optimal from a ketogenic standpoint because you're going to have too many of your calories allocated to protein, not enough to your fuel supply and the dietary fat. And then there's going to be a gluconeogenic response from that elevated protein. And that's not a bad thing. Like gluconeogenesis is not a bad thing. A lot of people in the keto space fear too much protein and they eat too little protein. I'm not suggesting anybody eat too little protein, but you don't want so much so that you're distracting from the quality that you could get from the dietary fats and it hinder your overall fuel supply. Because there is a point of diminishing returns with protein as well.
Got it. So you said kind of the target would be, right around 1 pound or 1 gram per body weight. When does protein become too low that you're kind of in a dangerous ballpark?
Yeah. So if the goal is to build muscle, I don't really ever see a benefit in going below that 1 gram per pound of lean mass. Like there's just no benefit to it. Sometimes I'll go lower than that in the very tail end of a competition prep when my calories are very low and my priority shifts from building muscle to simply preserving the muscle that I have built. And when my calories are very low for that finite period of time in a prep, I'll prioritize keeping my hormones more stable and my energy levels up. And I tend to do that with a higher percentage of my calories coming from dietary fat. So my protein will often dip below that 1 gram per pound lean mass indicator in that very finite period of time. But then once I transition into a building phase or a maintenance phase, I'm always north of that 1 gram per pound of lean mass. And I'll try and increase that gradually until I start seeing some adverse effects from the elevated protein. So, once you get to a point where it's just too much protein, you're probably going to have a little more brain fog, some GI distress, things of that nature. So you don't have to keep pushing that envelope higher and higher. But from a muscle building standpoint, you probably don't want to dip below that for any length of time.
Got it. And you've mentioned hormones here a few times. What are the benefits? Obviously, a large portion of our audience is going to be that 35 and older male crowd. So from a hormone perspective, testosterone and kind of these other important markers, what are the benefits of being keto versus standard American, traditional bro, carbohydrate based diet? Like what role does the keto play in our hormones?
Yeah, so fats are super important. I mean, like cholesterol, for instance, is the precursor to testosterone. So if you have very little cholesterol in circulation, you're probably not going to have optimal hormone levels. And when you're in a prep and when you're when you're losing a lot of body fat, if you have very little body fat and you have very little dietary fat coming in, your hormones are most certainly going to tank. That's why you see so many natural athletes, especially, walk around like zombies in the last half of a prep or last month of a prep because they have very little dietary fat coming in. Their hormones have all totally tanked and it's not sustainable whatsoever. But by keeping dietary fat relatively high in the context of the lower calories and very low body fat, you can kind of hedge the bets and keep those hormone levels in a much more stable range.
Yeah, man. The brain fog thing is something like I don't think people really understand like how like your brain just shuts down like when you get to those super extreme low levels of body fat. I mean, I literally remember my first coach telling me like when we started our prep, he's like, "Hey, you're gonna want to try to take work off in the final couple of weeks of leading up to your show." I was like, "I can't stop working," and I didn't even expect what was going to come. Like I told you, I was working in kind of a sales office, kind of outbound calls. I literally would dial the phone and I forget what I'm supposed to say. Like I had scripts and everything, and like completely just shuts off all this function. So it's good to hear that there's other alternatives out there. I mean, I wish I would have met you. I stopped competing in 2016, so a lot of this was not even really around. You weren't even really following it yet. What about food choices? Obviously, I know that the airing of this episode is the end of January. One of the reasons I want to have you on was kind of World Carnivore Month. I think carnivore is something that I've utilized various times. So from a protein and fat perspective, like where should people be getting their food sources from?
Yeah, so I always recommend people prioritize, real wholesome single ingredient foods. I mean, like just using myself as an example, I mean, pretty much everything I eat is animal based. I'll have a lot of eggs, I'll have a lot of red meat. I'll try and prioritize ruminants as opposed to, monogastric animals like chickens and pork, but I'll have some chicken, pork, fish, things of that nature as well. But a lot of beef, a lot of lamb, a lot of venison. I do a lot of hunting, so being able to kind of provide my own meat in the form of venison is nice. I'll do some vegetables. I don't eat a whole lot of veggies, but I'll do some veggies. And then I eat a keto brick every day, so that kind of makes things easy from getting the fat in. But yeah, I mean, my typical caloric intake is around 3,000, and it's all coming from good quality food sources as opposed to a bunch of supplements.
Yeah, really good segue here. Keto brick. What is that?
Yeah, so Keto Brick was something that I made out of necessity for my own benefits during my 2017 competition prep. And I never planned on it being a product, never planned on it being something that I created and sold. It was just basically a meal replacement bar that fit the ketogenic macros I was trying to hit and made meal prep much easier. And I was documenting my prep on YouTube at the time, and people kept watching the videos and asking what this thing was because I was just showing them what I was eating. And I just kind of blew it off and said, "Oh, it's nothing, it's just something I'm working on." Um, but then I kept getting all this interest for it. So people were like, you got to give us the recipe. Where do we buy these things?" So my girlfriend at the time, Crystal, wife now, we just rolled up our sleeves and learned about making a food product business. And the rest is history. We've since made this ourselves. We keep all the production in house. We've scaled up to several different kitchens. We now have this massive warehouse space that we're producing these in, and we've kept the production under our own roof from day one. And we ship these things all over the world. They're basically a 1,000 calorie shelf stable ketogenic meal replacement bar.
Yeah, it's amazing to see what you guys have built in a very short window of time. And I think it's just, I mean, I think it's very early in what is going to become I mean, a true empire. Like I really see a movement, and I see a like a much bigger brand than just the Robert, Keto Savage Sikes. Like I really think that the brick is going to be something. Will it reach Quest bar status? Probably not, because it obviously doesn't have that mass appeal. But I think it's incredible what you've already built, and I want to spend some time on kind of the business entrepreneurship side. So for you, did you always want to be an entrepreneur? Was business something kind of always forefront of your mind and something that you wanted to do in life, or has this kind of been just like this business, has it kind of just been something that's kind of like been birthed out of a necessity for you?
Yeah, well, the Keto Brick itself was definitely birthed out of necessity. But yeah, I definitely always wanted to be in a business or have this entrepreneurial. I've always had this entrepreneurial drive and spirit, so I just didn't know what that was going to manifest itself into. And I had done a bunch of stupid get rich quick schemes in the past, try to like drop ship stuff from Amazon, tried to do all this stuff that people on YouTube gurus tell you to do, and none of that worked. Once I really started doubling down on what I was good at, what I was passionate about, and where I could add value to the community at a larger scale, that's where I started to actually gain momentum and see success. And for me, that all transcended with the bodybuilding, the nutrition, the ketogenic diet, all kind of coming together at the right time in the right place, and gaining momentum in the space.
Got it. What was your upbringing like? Like, who was Robert growing up as a kid, and what was home life like?
Yeah, so I mean, I grew up out in the country. I grew up on a farm, had a bunch of animals, and my folks are very well educated. My mom, she is a high up on the totem pole in management at the hospital, and then my dad is a professor, PhD, teaching universities from a scientific standpoint. He teaches biology, mammalogy, zoology, all the animal sciences. So I grew up in a very educated, driven family. I mean, my folks are amazing, but like they weren't entrepreneurial in spirit at all. My uncle was entrepreneurial, so I kind of took after him in that regard. I got a job after I graduated college. I got a job in as a train master doing corporate America for the railroad, and that was a really good paying job that a lot of people fresh out of college would have killed for. But it wasn't scratching my itch. It wasn't bringing me any fulfillment. So I even while I was in the corporate world, I was trying to branch out and build something with my own two hands. So I got into real estate, tried to do like rental income properties, and then basically just quit the railroad to strike out on my own. And then that's kind of when I got into extreme debt, like $250,000 in debt, and kind of hit this like sink or swim state. And that's when I really started seeing success with the business.
Yeah. Now, was that the same uncle that was there in the weight training? That was also the entrepreneur.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
that's awesome, man. Yeah, dude, your story is, I mean, it's classic. It's classic entrepreneur. It's that 10-year overnight success, like failure, 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 willingness to keep going, keep trying, keep throwing things at the wall, knowing that something is eventually gonna stick. Have a lot of entrepreneurs. A lot of kind of online business owners in the health and fitness space that do listen to the show, because in addition to Rebuild Recovery and the porn coaching, I also coach a handful of business owners, about 40 business owners on my roster right now. So if we can talk more about kind of those early days with you and Crystal, and what it was like. I mean, you said like you guys had no background in food, you had no background in distribution. What did that look like? And how were you guys able to, figure this all out on the go? Just, I'm assuming, just making a lot of mistakes, like trying a lot of things that were failing, a lot of upset customers. Yeah. What were the early days like of Keto Brick?
Man, it was brutal because I was broke. I was working like 4 different jobs to try and make ends meet and pay the bills. She was working multiple jobs. She was like a barista at a coffee shop. She was doing nannying for the special needs kids. So she was doing all kinds of stuff. I was doing all kinds of stuff. And then we were trying to build this business. So at the time, we were living in this little bitty townhouse apartment, and we basically turned that into a warehouse space. We had zero furniture, so our living room is full of racks with packaging supplies and tape guns and stickers and labels and everything. And then the only place where we could produce the bricks was 3 hours away in a commercial kitchen space. So we would load up all of the supplies, drive 3 hours, stay up all night making bricks, drive back 3 hours, put them on the website. They'd sell out in like 2 minutes. And then we'd have to do it all over again. And at the time, there was a lot of demand for the bricks, but there was very little supply because it was just her and I making them. So people were just ruthless, man. Like they were so mad at us for not being able to meet demand, and they were like criticizing our business prowess and everything. So that was kind of hard. We had to kind of get thick skin there, but there was a lot more people that were supportive and encouraging. So that was promising. And then we just continued to scale up. We hired friends and family and cousins and all kinds of stuff to try and help us, produce more. And then from there, we found a commercial kitchen space that had space to grow. So we did that. We lived in the warehouse space for 3 years while we were in that location. And then from there, we moved to our current location, which is twice as big as those 3 buildings were there. So we just keep bigger and bigger and getting better as we
Yeah,
go.
man, that's amazing. I love those, those stories. You sleeping on the floor, sleeping in the office, sleeping in the warehouse. Like that's when like people have like there's something inside. You can see it. Like that guy's gonna win in whatever he does. Um, talk about mindset. Like how were you able to keep going? I mean, you said at one point multiple six figures in debt. I'm assuming at that point maybe some of the family is like, what are you doing? Like educated, like you get a job, go back to corporate America. So how were you able to manage the mindset?
Man, it wasn't easy. I mean, it's still not easy. Like it never gets easy. Like there's all kinds of stressors that I have now that I didn't have, 5 years ago. Like there's never any lack of stress, I don't think. But for me, like I'm doing the right thing for the right reasons. Like I don't have a business to make a bunch of money. I have a business to add a bunch of value. The people that are in the space that email me daily, that DM me, that interact with me on social media, like hearing their success stories and hearing that something I've said or done has empowered them to want to be better and get their health improved and add more years to their life, like that's how I know I'm in the right space and doing something I'm passionate about that's adding value to others. So for me, it's just knowing that. Like I mean, it could all disappear tomorrow and I wouldn't have regretted doing what I'm doing and how I'm spending my time because I know I'm making a difference, even if it's just in the few people that I interact with on social or whatnot. I mean, just I know that people's lives are positively impacted by what I'm doing and why. And when you know you're doing something for the right reasons, you don't have to feel guilty about how you're doing it. You just keep doing it. And like I said, I don't have all the answers. There's probably a million different ways to do what I'm doing, probably many better ways to do what I'm doing. But I'm passionate about the lifestyle and I feel good about every decision that I've made for the past several years. And I'm just going to keep doing that, man.
Love it so much. Yeah, that's that's the birth and the genesis of everything that we're doing here. I got into the online fitness space to make money, like full transparency. I had a previous business from 2013 to 2018 in kind of the ticketing entertainment space. I wasn't passionate about that either. That was a pure cash machine for me. Like I didn't like to be a broker. Like all I did was bought and sold tickets. Like I had no real interaction with my customers, but I saw the end of that kind of coming around the end of 2016. So I jumped online because fitness was something I was passionate about. But the fitness business for me online was once again, it was a money making machine, or it was an attempt at building a money making machine online. And it's probably the reason why, like, Frank Rich Fitness never really took off. I mean, it had like mediocre success at the beginning, but it never got to a point where I had other friends and I saw other people succeeding online. Because once again, it came from the place of I'm trying to do this to make money. This podcast, though, was birthed out of impact. Like I had a story, I had a transformation I had gone through, and I felt that there was a need for people to hear it. And then out of that, an entire new company has been birthed. And here we are 2.5 years into the podcast, 2 years into Rebuild Recovery. Pure focus on impact from the beginning. No monetization goal in mind when we first started, has now turned into what will be multi six figures this year probably. And it's been that number one focus on the impact from the beginning. So I 100% resonate with all of that.
Yeah, 100%, man. I mean, I feel like there's a lot of people that make money just simply for the sake of making money. And I'm not here to, say that that's right or wrong. For me, though, like there's so much more to life than money. Yeah, we all need money to make the wheels turn, et cetera, et cetera. But like when you're doing something because you're passionate about it, because it's positively impacting your life and the life of those around you and the life of those that aren't around you, but positively impacting them nonetheless, like you can feel good about that. Like I can literally die tomorrow and feel good about the life that I've lived up to this point. And I feel like that's a pretty good litmus test for whether or not I'm doing the right thing with my time.
Yeah, I love that. So I think you said the keto brick is around 1,000 calories. Is it designed to be a meal? Is it a meal replacement bar? Is it designed to be dessert? Like how do people consume the bricks? I know there's probably a lot of different ways that people consume it, but from the beginning, what was kind of your vision? Like, was this going to be like you eat this and it replaces one of your meal, or is it something that you're meant to eat over the course of like multiple days? Like, what was your original vision for it, and how has that kind of evolved with how you've seen people using it?
Yeah, so I mean, the original vision for my, prep endeavors was simply to give me ample dietary fats in a very quick and easy, convenient form that made calculating my macros for the day much easier. And the brick does that effortlessly. I mean, it's 1,000 calories. The macros are pretty consistent across all the flavors, and it just allows me to get that dietary fat in from a quality source in a very convenient manner. And that's honestly pretty much what people use it for to this day. It's great for backpackers and hunters, people that are out, off the
Mm.
grid or something like that. A lot of people will I'll oftentimes cut it in half, have half of my first meal and half of my second meal. So I've got a good source of fat for both meals. Some people that have fewer calorie demands, they'll melt it down into multiple, 10 pieces, for instance, in like little molds. So each bite is 100 calories. So you can kind of it's really modular in the sense that you can kind of make it work for whatever your goals are with whatever your macros are.
Yeah, I didn't even think about that. The outdoor um, space, like that's got to be what's the shelf life? I mean, how long is it shelf sustainable for?
I mean,
Is
over
it
a year. I mean, so
is it
yeah, you can use it for quite some time.
got it? And it's all natural foods
Yeah, I mean,
ingredients.
there's a bunch of keto products out there, man, and most of them are just like, I'm probably gonna sound biased being the owner of a consumer packaged good, but a lot of these keto products are just crap, man. Like, there's a bunch of fillers in there. There's a lot of times more carbohydrates than fats and proteins in a lot of these keto marketed products, which to me is just not even keto. But the bricks are all high quality fats. The main ingredient being cacao butter, which is the best source of stearic acid, higher even than beef suet, which is oftentimes hailed as the best source of stearic acid. But stearic acid has got a whole host of benefits. The protein, we have two different proteins. One's a veggie protein for people that are sensitive to whey. The other one is a whey concentrate from grass finished cattle. So that's a good quality source as well. And then depending on the flavor, there's either some nut butters or cacao nibs. Just kind of depends on the flavor after that. But those are the two main ingredients.
Yeah, no, I'm really glad you kind of touched on the products out there. Obviously, we've seen this just massive explosion, in the past few years with just the keto diet, being talked about, mainstream news. You see, if you walk in the grocery store, it's like the magazine articles, every single one of them's got something about the keto. And obviously you get people that, see that as an opportunity to make money from a business perspective. But I'm so glad you touched on it. Like, you got to pay attention to the ingredients. You got to look at the label. Like, just because this says the word keto on it, like if it's not aligned with those macros. So how can people know? Like, are you somebody that monitors like strips? Are you checking ketones daily? Do you have other monitors? Do people need to be doing that? Or once you get to a certain point, like, can you tell when you're in ketosis and not in ketosis?
Yeah, I mean, you don't have to do that. I mean, I'll oftentimes check my glucose and ketones when I'm doing some type of dietary experiment to see how they're affecting my numbers. But once you become fat adapted, if as long as you're not eating a bunch of carbohydrates, then you're not really using carbohydrates and glucose for fuel. And if you're feeling great and you're only eating proteins and fats, then it stands to reason that you're probably pretty well fat adapted and tapping into fat and ketones for fuel. So you don't have to check those numbers on a regular basis by any means. It's just kind of nice to use if you're curious about how a certain food impacts your levels. But yeah, I would not recommend people just become a slave to tracking, their ketones and glucose index at all times either.
Yeah, because that's just as bad as being a slave to your Tupperware.
Yeah, totally.
To your Tupperware.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. So you don't have to obsess over that by any means. But then, yeah, like you were saying with the foods and everything, looking at the macros is important, but then diving a layer deeper than that and actually looking at the ingredients as well. Because I mean, there's some of these companies that are trying to like really prey on people's ignorance. They'll put, net carbs, 2 grams, uh, keto approved or stuff like that on there. But you look and it's just a whole bunch of filler ingredients. There's several like 30 grams plus of total carbohydrates. The fat sources are all processed, vegetable oils. It's just not good stuff. So, I mean, I wouldn't recommend that for anybody.
What other, maybe non-performance benefits have you noticed? Obviously, it's been 7 years. I'm assuming it's been. I mean, it's clearly life-changing for you. But for me, when I did carnivore for the first time in 2019, I was somebody that had really bad sleep apnea, like really bad. I probably woke up, I don't know, half a dozen, if not a dozen times, real loud snoring. People could hear me in the other room. And one of the first things I noticed when I got about 30 days into it and I began to really drop a lot of weight is my sleep improved. Number one, I was sleeping through the night, but I was dating somebody. We were living together at the time. She's like, at a certain point, I stopped snoring. Like, so it drastically improved my sleep. And I believe that probably had to carry over with my energy, focus, and so forth throughout the day, because I was somebody for a long time. Pot of coffee. Like, I need the pre-workout. I need the post-workout caffeine because I'm exhausted. So I was living off of caffeine, but then I wasn't sleeping at night. And then I think, like I said, the minute the snoring stopped and I started sleeping through the night, I noticed more focused, more clean energy throughout the day. So what have been some of the other, non-performance, non-muscle benefits that you've seen by switching to the keto diet?
Yeah, I mean, sleep. I don't get a whole lot of sleep, but I felt the quality of my sleep has improved since doing a ketogenic diet. I also do mouth taping, which is not really ketogenic, but that kind of helps to prevent from those mild sleep apnea. Mild form of sleep apnea basically just forces me to
You
breathe
do
through my
mouth
nose, and that helps me
taping?
sleep a little bit better. Yeah, have you not heard about
No.
that? Yeah, so basically, I heard about this through Mike Mutzel, a super brilliant guy. Basically, when you sleep, you have a tendency to open your mouth slightly, which causes your tongue to block your airway. That's why you snore or stop breathing, kind of like a mild form of sleep apnea. By simply using some micro pore tape and taping your mouth shut, you're forced to breathe nasally all night long, so your tongue stays stationary, and then you're able to fall into a deeper sleep sooner and stay there a bit longer. So I do that every single night. Kind of weird. I mean, it takes a little bit to get used to. You're like taping your mouth shut. Some people feel claustrophobic for a bit, but once you get used to it, it just becomes
Yeah, I
normal.
was gonna say at first that's got to be, I don't know if scary or fear, like it's got to be fearful at the beginning, like, right? I mean, I'm just trying to imagine. I hear Dr. Angel Human talk a lot about, the importance of nasal breathing, kind of why low impact
Yeah.
exercising. It's something I try. Like, I'm not great at it. If I'm out for a walk, 20-30 minutes walk, I'm trying to consciously, keep my mouth closed and do as much nasal breathing as I possibly can. But I've never heard about anybody doing it while they're sleeping. Is a specific type of tape that you're
Yeah.
using,
I just use a super cheap Amazon micro pore tape. That way it doesn't like, stick too bad or like cause any irritation to the skin, but just a simple micro pore medical tape is all you
got
need.
it. Were there any nights early on where you woke up like in a panic and you ripped the tape off or anything like that?
No, not so much for me, but I have to laugh because like when I go to a hotel, for instance, like, I hate the lights, like the indicator lights, so I'll oftentimes, cover all those with, like, a shirt or something, or I'll just put a shirt over my eyes, so I'm, like, blindfolded. So I'm blindfolded, my mouth's taped, somebody breaks in, I'm pretty much already wrapped up and ready to go for 'em.
Oh wow. Why the light? I mean, it's we I've never done a specific episode on sleep. It's something I definitely need to get on. But we've had, multiple biohackers on and talking about the sleep and the lights. Like, why are you covering the lights? What impact is that having on your sleep?
Yeah, so I mean, your body's got photoreceptors all over the skin. So like your body can tell when there's a light on, even if your eyes are closed. And I just noticed myself, I don't sleep nearly as well, nearly as good if the lights are on at all. So it's pretty much got to be pitch black for me to really optimize my sleep. Sleep is something that I've played around a lot with over the years because for the longest, I mean, when I first started the business, I was sacrificing sleep so much. I have no doubt that I've cut years off of my life from lack of sleep. So now I'm highly motivated to really optimize my sleep. So the mouth
Mm.
taping, the blacked out rooms, the colder temperature for the thermoregulation effect. I mean, really kind of optimizing my sleep's been an area of focus for sure. And those are just a few of the things that I try and do on a regular basis.
Yeah. What about like a pre-sleep routine? Anything you're doing, pre-bed routine, any supplementation that you're taking? This is something that I'm personally really trying to dial in right now. Like I said, I struggled with it for a really long time. And as we're growing and scaling this year, like I'm noticing days are getting longer, like sleep is getting shorter and shorter. So trying to really optimize. So what do you have a pre-bed routine that you do? Like, when do lights shut off? Like, what are I know you mentioned the 3 year mouth breathing, lights, and then cold temperature. Any other big hacks that have really been beneficial for you?
Yeah, I try to avoid screens. I'll wear like blue light blocking glasses if I am going to be looking at a screen. I definitely avoid like shows and movies and anything that kind of like stimulates you more before going to bed. So that's obviously not good. Having sex right before going to bed, that helps for sure. So you could do that. But yeah, I mean, any of those are pretty tried and true, effective remedies for sure.
Yeah, I forget when it was. I think it was 2019, 2018. I heard somebody talk about like the sporting games. Like, I was never a big movie watcher at night, but I watched a lot of sports. Like, I would watch baseball almost every single night. And the way that he framed it is like when you're watching these sports and like you're getting excited with the game, it's like you're raising your heart rate, you're raising your autonomic nervous system, like to get an excited level, and then you're expecting to go to sleep like 30 minutes later. So that was something I completely shut off, was like trying to consume or watch sports late in the evening. But um, what about food wise? Food timing, does that have an effect on it?
Yeah, I try to avoid eating right before going to bed, and I try to make my last meal higher in dietary fat than protein. So that tends to improve my sleep quality a bit as well. If I have a pretty good bolus of dietary fat as my last meal, that's been good. And then honestly, like reading, like just old fashioned reading with a book as opposed to like a screen can be super advantageous as well to kind of help calm down your entire body, nervous system, and just kind of set the stage for falling
Yeah,
asleep.
yeah, I love that. Yeah, let's try to dial this home here. This has been a fascinating conversation, just so jam packed. I believe with nuggets and value for people. You mentioned before we started recording that you got a book coming up. Talk about the book, kind of the story behind it. What can people expect out of it, and when is it going to be out and available for people?
Yeah, so the book, I started writing the book at the end of 2019 during my last competition prep, and I wrote it, throughout the whole pandemic. While everybody else was, who knows what they were doing throughout the whole pandemic. I was writing a book most of that time, so it's taken me like 2 years to write. But it's basically everything that I've learned with regard to ketogenic natural bodybuilding. Title of it is Ketogenic Bodybuilding: A Natural Athlete's Guide to Competitive Savagery. It's available on Amazon, Barnes and Noble. There's a website for it specifically, ketogenicbodybuilding.com, that links to the book, and there's like a companion spreadsheet for it. But yeah, it's basically my entire principle protocol wrapped up into a book as far as how to go through a competition prep and improve your body composition in a healthy, sustainable manner, and then also the reverse diet portion after the show is over, so you can return to a healthy maintenance intake and then a surplus, and to make this whole process sustainable, healthy, and allow you to keep getting better and better year after year, as opposed to worse and worse, like a lot of competitors do by not having a structured reverse diet in place.
Yeah, another selfish question for me personally here. What was your writing process like? Because this is something that I'm struggling with right now as I'm working on a book. I mean, here you are, growing and scaling, a massive company. You talked about you guys just bought this building, kind of moving into things. It had all these kind of multiple things. You got a team that I'm assuming you're managing. Are you still kind of operating? Like, are you like still running day-to-day operations of Keto Brick? So that's taking up a massive amount of your time. Then you have your training, your coaching. Then you have your own personal training, competing in bodybuilding. Where did the book fit in to all that? And what was your writing process like? I'm selfishly asking that question.
Yeah, man. I mean, there's no like cookie cutter answer I can give you. For me, the most momentum I gained with the book was when I committed to writing 500 words a day without fail, no matter what. Every single day, no days off, 500 words a day minimum. Once I committed to doing that, I was able to make some really good progress, and I did that for several months. I mean, the book is like 450 pages long, so it took me quite a while. But
Mm.
the writing process is no joke, man. Like, it's just a freaking journey. But when you commit to a certain page number, or word count every single day, and you do that without fail, even if it's not great, even if you wind up scrapping that entire day's worth of writing, not sacrificing that momentum and building that as a habit
Mhm.
is super super
Yeah,
helpful.
it comes down to habit, right? And keeping your commitments. If you commit to doing something, whether or not it's perfect. I had Stephen Pressfield on. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Stephen. He wrote The War of Art, Turning Pro. He talks about the same thing. Like, he shared something he learned early on in his career. Somebody had asked him, like, or he had asked somebody, do you wait for inspiration to strike, to write? And he goes, yeah, but inspiration strikes every day at 9 a.m. So he had built like his routine, like he's gonna sit down, he's gonna stare at this blank screen every day at 9 a.m., knowing that if he sits here long enough, like he's gonna work through that resistance and inspiration will strike him. So yeah, I love hearing that because that's exactly kind of what I committed to. I had wrestled around with, I want to do 1,000, 1,500, 2,000 words a day. I was like, you know what, at the beginning, let me commit to 500. So that's a process that I've had here, and we're slowly chugging away. It's gonna take longer than I originally thought, but yeah,
That's awesome,
yeah,
man. Yeah, definitely give yourself more time than you think it's going to take. Because I mean, I wouldn't have imagined it would have taken me 2 years to write it at the onset. But now that I look back on it, it's like I'm glad I had the 2 years to write it, or else it probably wouldn't have got
yeah.
done.
It's better to take longer and have it done the right way than to produce and pump out a piece of garbage. I guess that's not really gonna help anybody. So, yeah, dude, this has been an amazing conversation. We have one question that we end every single episode with, but before we get there, Robert, if people are interested in you and your coaching, in the book, in Keto Brick, we're hanging out online socially. I know you got a podcast that you host personally. You got another podcast that you co-host with, a friend of the show here, Danny. So yeah, just kind of where can people connect with you? Where can they find you online? Where are you hanging out at these days?
Yeah, so ketosavage.com and Keto Savage on all the social platforms for me, ketobrick.com and Keto Brick on social for the bricks. And then the book itself is going to be
Okay. And what's
ketogenicbodybuilding.com.
the release date of the book?
The 30th of this month,
Okay.
January. So not sure when this
Okay.
podcast goes live, but it's just
Yeah,
right around the corner.
the day before we go live, I think we're set to air on Monday the 30th. If I have the calendar correct, it's Monday is the 31st. So yeah, guys, check that out. We'll link all the sites, we'll link all the social, we'll link the podcast there below. So Robert, as we dial it home here today, obviously the title of the show is called The Superhuman Life. And for me, when I talk about living a superhuman life, it's really a belief system. It's a way that I try to show up and live and operate in the world every single day. And it's coming from the place for me that I believe that we're all created for a specific purpose. Each one of us has a calling on our life, and yours is clearly got something to do with the ketogenic and helping people and inspiring people through all the work that you're doing. So that's kind of the first segment of it. The second one is we can't just walk into this purpose. Like, we have to be willing to take ownership for our life, take responsibility for our actions, and constantly be pursuing what that purpose is. So for me, that's what I try to kind of define it as, is you're clear that you have a purpose, but you're taking aggressive action every single day to bring that purpose to the world in service of others. But we like to end every single show here with getting the guest take. So Mr. Robert Sikes, how would you define living a superhuman life?
Yeah, I think that's pretty good. I mean, I don't know if I could best what you just said there, man, but I feel like
Well, I've had 112 episodes to perfect that, so it changes a little bit.
I've always said that
Changes a little bit.
you can learn something from every single person out there, like all 7.5 billion of us. So, being open, being receptive to what others, think and their thoughts towards things. But then I've always believed that just as you can learn something from everybody, you're capable of greatness. We all have this greatness within us. So much of us feel fear or anxiety or just lack of confidence in letting that come from them. And like we said in the very beginning, like we're all born with this innate savagery inside of us. You just have to harness that and then run with it. And I feel like if you're stuck in a job that you have zero fulfillment in, if you're in a life path that you don't find excitement in, then something's wrong. Like, my favorite day of the week is Monday because I get to start the week off strong doing what I love doing. So you owe it to yourself to figure out what that is and then double down on it, because you will die. Like, life is finite. It's short. It's going to be up before you know it. So spending every waking moment of your life doing something that you feel is passionate, that you're adding value to the world with. I mean, that's what you should be doing.
Love that. Love that. Guys, get out there, go find your inner savage, and share it and impact the world. Brother, thank you so much for your time here today. If you guys are out there and you enjoyed this conversation, and you're getting value out of this, you want to help us continue to grow this mission, grow this message out into the world, you can support the show in one of two ways. First off, if you're listening on Apple, Spotify, Podbean, whatever platform you are, drop us a rating, leave us a written review. But more importantly, if there's somebody in your life that could benefit from hearing this conversation, whether they're struggling with some mindset things, whether they're struggling with finding their inner savage, whether they're struggling with finding the effective approach to transform their physique, or finding the effective approach to get into a lifestyle of training, do them the favor and do us the blessing, or do them the blessing and us the favor, sharing this conversation with them. But for Robert, Keto Savage, Sikes, Frank Rich, we love you guys, and we'll see you next week.